Paul, sometimes if you sign out and sign back in, that tends to work.
Vern, can you hear me?
I can
Well-
hear.
Okay, just making sure speakers are working.
Yeah, no, yeah, everything's fine.
It's a very quiet bunch.
Yeah, I know Paul is having big problems hearing and speaking, I guess. Yeah, both.
Yeah, Paul seems unable to hear us.
Paul, maybe try coming on with your cell phone.
So Shelly Chilino, my administrative assistant, is calling Paul right now to try and see if she can give him some tech help. So hopefully that works. Technically, he's the chair, so he'd be kicking us off. But he can't hear us and he can't talk to us. So in the event that Paul is unable to participate, is there anybody willing to step in to facilitate the meeting? Just run through the agenda.
Yeah, that's fine. So Paul, you can't hear us either, correct?
Yeah, he said he can't.
So real quick. All right, hold on one sec, guys. I'm just gonna. The host has disabled screen sharing. Can someone enable it so I can just send Paul?
Yep.
Oh, he's on the phone now. Good. I just sent him a note through screen share, but I couldn't get it up.
Hello.
Do we think you saw it?
Not sure. I know Shelley was trying to call him. It looks like he might have got on the phone, but
Hold on one more time, guys.
okay. So Shelley's resending Paul the link. I think he's going to sign out and come back in with the revised link. We'll see if that works.
So I'm not sure who's hosting the meeting, but our treasurer from the library, Joe Grella, is going to be joining us. So that's who that would be if you see that name come up.
Okay. I don't see anyone as listed as an attendee yet.
Okay, he should be coming in at some point.
Okay.
So do we want to get started while he works it out? Do we want to,
Yeah, I think we should probably get going. I mean, we're 10 minutes in at this point, so Joel, if you want to take the
Yeah.
wheel, go ahead.
that's fine, that's fine. I'm just pulling up the agenda. All right, today is September 15th. The time is 6:10. We're calling to order the meeting of the Capital Improvement Advisory Board. We have a 4-item agenda today. Members present, if everyone wants to announce themselves. I am Joel Favaza, member. John, you want to announce yourself?
John McCarthy, member.
Kelly,
Kelly Branglioni, member.
Neil,
Neil Joyce, Construction Monitoring Services, present.
Stephen,
Stephen Sucker, present.
Jenny,
Jenny Benedict, Director of the Sawyer Free Library.
David,
David Fields, Community Development Director.
Paul Romer is here having technical difficulties. Mern,
Yeah, Mern Sibley, President of the Board of Sawyer Free Library, and the other Mern Sibley is Joe Grella. You can introduce yourself, Joe.
Yeah, I have a bootleg copy of this link. I had the public link and I couldn't see myself, no one could hear me. So yes, I'm in through Murray's, but I'm Joe Grella, treasurer of the library.
okay, and then John.
John Dunn, CFO for the city.
Okay, well, Paul's muted, so he might be getting closer.
That looks encouraging. Yeah.
So
Well, you need
the
to unmute yourself if you can hear us. There we go. No,
So the first item of tonight is to select a vice chair, as Paul laid out in his letter to us. Per the Code of Ordinances, the mayor appoints the chair, which is Paul, and then the body selects a vice chair. So it can be through nomination or volunteer. If anyone wants to volunteer, if anyone wants to nominate, the floor is open.
I'll nominate Joel Favaza.
Anyone else? All right, there's been a nomination for Joel Favaza. And I'm gonna, gosh, I guess, make a motion to appoint me vice chair, and then we'll vote on it.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Joel Favaza, the vice chair of the CIAB committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? Last chance. All right. Do roll call.
Still roll
vote
call
here.
vote, yeah.
All right. I should have the right roster up. If I missed somebody, my apologies. John,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
and Mern, you're on the board now, right? Or are you only here for the library?
I'm only here for the light. You thought I was on Capital Improvement? No, no.
I thought, or maybe I've just seen you in these emails. So who else is here
Yeah.
on the board?
I'm not on this board. Nope.
All right,
Can't
so
vote.
is it just John, Kelly, Stephen, and myself?
I wonder. I don't know.
And the chair.
This-
Sure.
And Paul, but he's having difficulty, yeah.
All right, well, to keep things clean, I'll vote for myself. That's a yes, and Paul will mark as an abstention because he's unavailable currently. And
I
motion.
believe it's a 7-man board, Joel, so 4 votes will
Right.
carry.
There we go. Motion passes. 4 in favor, 1 abstention, and 2 absences, I guess. So I think we should skip down to number 4. So I really want Paul in on 2 and 3. So at this point, we can turn it over to Mern, who's only here for the library and not here to join us in our otherwise routine fun. Mern and Joe and Jenny. I hope you guys have an order picked out as to how you'd like to speak, because I certainly don't know what it's supposed to be otherwise, and I'll let the three of you kind of work it
Yeah,
out.
I will give a little intro. How's that?
Sounds great.
So, yeah, this is our time to talk about our library capital project. And I just wanted to first address the question to make it clear to everybody why it is that Gloucester needs a new library. And you should understand that Sawyer Free Library is an investment in our whole community. It's open and free to people of all ages and backgrounds, so it benefits everyone. And as you all know, Gloucester is undergoing significant change, and the library is really key in this transition. The fishing industry and its supporting industries are declining, but at the same time, Gloucester is growing biotechnology and tourism to boost our economy and to attract visitors and residents. So Gloucester needs to retain its young adults and future workers. It needs to attract businesses that will strengthen the economy. It needs to foster community connectedness and support families who will build a life here. So our library is a community hub located in the heart of our city. Strengthening the library will benefit all Gloucester residents as our city heads into its 5th century. Today, the library's future is at risk due to the deficiencies and shortcomings of the library building. The library building systems are at the end of their useful life, and as these systems inevitably fail, they jeopardize the continuity of our public hours and our services. The building layout compromises public safety and has restricted accessibility for many visitors. Finally, and critically, the present public spaces are insufficient for current uses, and they're not suited for the technology of today or tomorrow. The community now has a historic opportunity to give Gloucester the 21st century library it deserves with a renovation and expansion of the facility. We have this opportunity due to a $9.3 million award from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners Construction Grant Program. This award is instrumental in the overall funding of this project. The design by Oden's LO Architects will completely modernize the library's infrastructure, will reimagine the existing interiors, and add 15,000 square feet of new space. We call this renovation and expansion of the Sawyer Free Library Sawyer Free 2025. 2025 because we plan on starting construction early in 2023, and it will take about 2 years. The 2025 Sawyer Free Library Plan realizes our vision by respecting our history and modernizing our building for technological advancements, new methods of learning, and new ways of sharing ideas and information. It's a vision that fosters the values of place, belonging, and connection in the Gloucester community. So what will be inside the new library? We're going to have a high quality 110-seat meeting space available to the community. We'll have a reimagined and improved Matt's Art Gallery, a climate-controlled local history room, a digital recording studio. We'll have a maker space with digital and other tools for making, learning, and collaborating. Study rooms will be there for individual or group study, and a 16-seat conference room. We'll have a space for teens that will foster interactions and allow for creative projects using technology. We'll have a beautiful new expanded children's room, and there will also be a quiet reading room for those who like to be undisturbed. So in designing this library, we gave serious thought to the times ahead, knowing we'll be in a world of changing climate. The objective is for the library to be a demonstration project for how buildings can address climate change. We also want to provide a teaching resource on sustainability. The design of the library will qualify for LEED Gold status. This is going to be an all-electric library, and it will be a zero carbon emission building. The library and the Saunders House will have a solar array totaling 143 panels. There'll be a state-of-the-art rainwater collection and irrigation system, including an 8,000-gallon rainwater storage tank that will supply a drip and sprinkler irrigation system. The landscaping will be done with native plants and trees and will include a children's native plant garden. So I hope this brief introduction has given you a sense of the importance of Sawyer Free 2025 capital project. And please let me know if you have any questions tonight.
Thank you, Mern, and thank you, Joel, for starting this. I'm now on a phone, so apologies for if this gets a little odd. I think one of the things that would be helpful is to make sure that Jenny and John Den both weigh in on how the arrangement of this library's financing is going to work, because one of the things I think our board has to do is understand how it impacts all other capital investment projects. So there'd be a good time to get that perspective from John and from Jenny Benedict. John, you want to start?
Well, I wonder if Jenny wants to start, just
Okay.
to kind of lay out how we got here, and the issues that have come up with the state, Mass Board of Library Commissioners, and I will certainly pop in and say what happens on the city side.
Sure. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, that grant has quite specific requirements around it in terms of who can accept it. And it is actually the city who is the applicant and must be the financial and project administrator of that grant. So that puts the library board and the city into an arrangement where the library board retains ownership of the land, and the city becomes the financial and project administrator. The library board has approved at this point an MOU, which is quite an extensive document around this arrangement. And I think what John will explain in better terms than I will, is that we have discussed with the city the financing model where it's the city's borrowing capacity that will enable this project to move forward. The library board, as a public library, is very limited in its the means by which it can borrow, which are basically none. So it doesn't have the ability to go through a banking sort of way to finance this project. But the project does qualify to be funded through city bonds. So perhaps John would like to speak a little more about that.
Certainly, thank you, Jenny. So essentially what we have is a situation where the library technically is not owned by the city. And the library really does not have at this point the ability to issue debt. They could certainly amend their articles to do that, but they could not issue debt in the same way as the city issues debt, which is double tax exempt. The other issue here, as Jenny pointed out, is that the grant from the Board of Library Commissioners goes directly to the city, and that's the way it's always worked. So what we had to do is put a situation in place where the city would basically issue the debt for the library completion, and that would be supported by the grant for the Board of Library Commissioners, as well as the fundraising that goes on. And we will be able to issue debt double tax exempt and make this go forward. So it took a while to kind of make sure that all the bits and pieces of this were in place. But at this point, I think we're in pretty good shape. We had conversations with various people who advise us on this, including, tax lawyers, to basically say how we have to kind of say things that we're going to be doing as we move forward. But at this point, it's going to be, a general obligation bond of the city that's going to be issued for the entirety of the project that has not already been funded. Everybody has to recognize that that is a general obligation of the city. So if for some reason that the grant is going to be not coming through or somewhat be delayed, or that fundraising is not going to be in position, that the city may have to carry that. We are all hopeful that that will not happen, that in fact, both the grant and the fundraising will in fact cover the entire cost of the project. But we also recognize the fact that the grant will come in over a 5-year period. And it's likely that some of the fundraising will come in over a multi-year period. So the idea here is that we will issue debt on a short-term basis, 1-year basis, relatively cheap. We'll see where interest rates go, but right now it's relatively cheap, and just roll that debt each year and reduce it as we need to, as funds come in. So we think that this is, we've been talking about this for a long period of time. It's taken us some kind of thought process to get here, but I think that this is a good approach, and it will get ultimately a library that will be beneficial to all the citizens of Gloucester.
Thank you, John. I think what's helpful in trying to provide the board with some context here is, how much do we borrow now as general obligation debt for capital investments on an annual basis, and how does this fit into that borrowing picture?
So the borrowing, Paul, will come basically as laid out by cash flow for the project. So that's really where it is. We're not going to borrow, we're not going to go out, if this is a, $28 million project, we're not going to borrow $28 million on the front end. We're going to kind of take a look at it and see what do we need to fund that is not going to be covered by either the state grant or by donations and pledges. So we'll go that way and try and minimize the borrowing on the short end. And we do this on a number of other projects each year. So we're looking at, what is the cash flow required to do this project, and what do we have for support?
Does anyone have questions for John or Jenny or for Mern? John?
Yeah, I think I've asked you this in the past, John. What protects the city? This is a property that we don't own. I think it's a great project, and I think we need it, and I'm 100% behind it. But will the city have a mortgage on the property? I know you have an MOU, but I mean, just in my dealings in real estate, I would think that would have something that would guarantee that the city, if for some reason the library went defunct or something, what protects the city?
Well, John, nothing protects the city. So when we issue bond debt, it's general obligation bond debt. We can't kind of put our hands up and say somebody else did not do what they said they were going to do. So that's there. On the other hand, this happens basically all the time. There's no city pledge. There is no lien on a particular property, whether it be a school property, a city property, or the library. It does not extend to a particular property that somebody could necessarily foreclose on. It's still an obligation of the city to make sure that those payments are made. In the end, this is all, even though the library is a distinct corporation, it is still a city managed corporation. So, I think we're in a position where, if we want to go forward, that if something does not happen the way it's planned, then the city will have to pay the debt. But it seems to be that everybody has, very good intentions and very good expectations that this will happen.
Joel?
So to that point, John, I have the best of intentions to pay back, the Cape Ann Savings Bank for my house loan. But just in case I don't, I did grant them a mortgage because it's not property they already own, unlike schools and the rest of the things that we would bond out for improvement. So why wouldn't the city say, hey, listen, we are, lending you money for a real estate project. We want the real estate put up as collateral to the city of Gloucester so that if there's a shortfall, there's leverage to say, hey, library, you got to go back out there and try a little harder, because if you don't, then, it becomes the city's library in a municipal sense, right? Isn't it? That's the great motivator for making sure that if fundraising efforts fall short and people start throwing their hands up and say, well, we came up 5 million short, good effort, guys, still a lot of money, good job, sorry, city of Gloucester, the last five's on you. You say, oh, well, the last five's on us, then, I guess this is our library now. It just seems, prudent.
Well, that's a good point, Joel. I mean, that's kind of where we are. So, in the end,
Sorry.
this is a nominal city asset. And, it is good for the city. So we're going to have to raise our hands, yes or no, that this is a good thing to do for the city. There's no way to have a foreclosure on this type of property. And, at this point, the property is owned and controlled by, the folks at the library board of trustees. So,
But maybe I'm missing. If let's say they had gone to Bank of America and said, hey, Bank of America, I need a $28 million bridge loan while I raise funds to rebuild this. And Bank of America said, that's fine. Well, you're going to sign a promissory note and you're going to grant us a mortgage on your property, right? Or are you saying that this entity can't grant mortgages, or that the city itself can't receive a mortgage?
well, you're asking me questions about legal issues that I am not going to opine
Okay.
on. Okay, so.
Okay.
I think I would just like to jump in and say that the library property is deeded in perpetuity as a public library. And that comes from how Samuel Sawyer set up the property. So it's legally, it's a different designation than a corporation owning the property outright. It's already got a specific purpose on its deed, which is also why it's not very attractive for the city to say, if the library defaults, then we'll take the property, because the property can only be used as a public library.
Yeah,
And-
and
and
let's
Jenny,
keep in
that's-
mind that, since 1884, the city's had, this library service given to it by the corporation. And it's only in the last, say, 80 years that there's been any city appropriations at all, right? It's just been a very long history of the library giving to the city and providing the service, and as Jenny says, deeded in perpetuity. So it's rather a special case.
Yeah, so this is a little bit different. In Massachusetts, there are libraries and cities or towns that are, put together the way that we have. In many cases, there are libraries that are actually, bits and pieces of the cities and towns. So we've got a little bit of a different issue. We do need to be able to take a look at what happens with the way the Mass Board of Library Commissioners issues their grants, and also how debt can be issued, in terms of double exempt tax debt versus, for example, MERN going out and knocking on banking doors and saying, how much you want to give us?
Is there a case study for the Board of Library Commissioners that of a municipality that's been in a similar situation that we can review?
Yes, I believe that there are. And in fact, from the city point of view, the attorney that's been negotiating the MOU has been involved in this type of situation before. So this is not, it's not common, but it's not unusual.
Would you like to get access to that, Kelly? Or would you like to check it out if it's available, readily available?
I think that would be helpful to us, yeah.
Okay. Joel?
Sure. So just kind of circling back, the reason for my concern is looking globally, as in the globe of Gloucester. I don't think anyone, well, maybe everyone argues about everything, right? But I don't think anyone would seriously argue that the library isn't a necessary resource, isn't, you know, a valuable piece of the community. I don't think anyone on the library board is not fully determined to, you know, raise the money required for this. But I would, you know, point to the YMCA. That's another beloved, longstanding institution. Everyone in the city has, you know, had a relationship with the YMCA, or almost everybody at one point or another in their lives. They use it for different purposes. And they went out on a huge capital campaign and they came up short. They didn't have enough. They didn't hit the goal of what they wanted to do. And that's why it's, you know, design changes had to be made. And there's certain things not at the new library that have been talked about, because despite, you know, the belovedness of the YMCA and despite the community support around it, they weren't able to hit all the benchmarks. And so you have all those people, I don't know whether people are tapped out or not, but you have a similar pool of donors. I would imagine that there's, if you draw the Venn diagram of YMCA and Sawyer Free Library donors, there's an overlap. It's not, you know, the same pool, but there's an overlap. And, you know, this city, from previous presentations that John has given, you know, has a lot of other capital obligations coming down the pike and already in process. And so what, you know, protection does the city have to make sure that this gets paid? Or am I misunderstanding and the city is just saying, we will appreciate however much can be raised, and the city is committing already to whatever the shortfall is, you know, we'll cover it and that's okay?
Well, I guess
John, Jenny?
Yep, I guess Joel, my response to that would be, again, if you've got a big project where you, number one, expect it to be covered 100% by grants and pledges, even if that falls short by 10%, 15%. And I would hate to see that happen, and I don't expect to see that happen, but you now have a new library that the city has had to, you know, support in that 10 or 15% shortfall. So, you know, I have often said through my many years of doing this type of stuff that, excuse me for saying it this way, other people's money, but that's where it is. And, you know, can we get to, you know, the goal of having a particular building or a particular improvement where the city is only on the hook for a relatively short period or a short amount of money? Certainly, again, as I say, I don't expect that to happen here, but yes, you do have to consider, everybody has to consider that that could be the situation.
So this is my last on this, and I'll be done with this. But I want to be clear, there is no mechanism or a minimum threshold. And so, for example, if things go, you know, unexpectedly very poorly, and they come up not, you know, 10 or 15%, they come up 10 or $15 million, $9 million trickles in, and they match, you know, another 9 up to 18 is a $10 million shortfall. that $10 million of debt that we don't get paid back from the library, then will have an impact on the city's other capital projects that otherwise was not anticipated or expected, and could delay other things that the city was otherwise going to do because debt service will be further constrained by that $10 million outstanding, correct?
So yes, again, this is a general obligation bond.
Okay.
So what is not covered by other sources of revenue has to be covered by the city.
Got
Yep.
it. Thank you.
So, John, go ahead.
John, how will this affect the ability of the city to borrow? And I know I've been with you through budget and finance before, and there are numbers you put out every year that you're comfortable with borrowing. And I know this isn't going to be borrowed $28 million the first year, but is this going to affect the city's borrowing capability going forward? And especially if the money trickles in instead of comes in its entirety.
Well, so the idea here, John, is that we will be issuing short-term debt each year on the total cost of the renovation. And, whatever comes in, we do know, for example, that the state grant will come in over 5 years. I fully expect that some of the pledges will come in over multiple years. For example, somebody may pledge or some entity may pledge $100,000, but it's going to be $100,000, $20,000 a year over 5 years. So we fully expect that what's going to happen here is that we will be issuing short-term debt, which is cheaper than long-term debt. And we will just kind of keep rolling it as we need to. But again, if we get to the end of 10 years, for example, then we're going to have to bond that. Now, the reason I would not suggest that the city bond it on the front end is because, unlike a mortgage, you can't prepay that for the most part. So you can't just, you take out $100,000 as a mortgage and you get an inheritance 5 years out and you say, I want to pay it off, then your bank will say, send us a check. That's not the way it works with municipal debt. So once we issue the debt, it's hard to prepay it. However, as we're expecting, these we're going to be rolling short-term notes, relatively cheaper than bond debt. We'll see where interest rates go over the next couple of years, but relatively cheaper than bond debt, and be able to reduce that as we receive revenues from both the state and from fundraising.
Okay. I know you said we have a $9 million grant coming in over 5 years. Is there any number that you can give us that's already a certain number that's going to be used right off the bat? I know they have where he has funds, and do we have a number of what they've already raised or what is in the kitty right now or in the purse?
All right, well, I'm going to have to kind of, defer that to Mern and to Jenny. And certainly part of this will come, in terms of working with Neil Joyce in terms of what we think cash flow is going to be on the project.
Okay,
Yeah,
and my reason for asking, John, is it's estimated that it's going to be a 2-year project. I'm certain that if it's a $28 million project, when it's done, we're going to have paid $28 million. So that's my reason for asking.
And John, as you well know, even though we expect it to be a $2 million project, the cash flow is probably going to be longer than that.
So I think it's appropriate to hear from Joe, our treasurer, Joe Grella, because he's the most informed probably about where we are at as far as things in the kitty, as you say.
I guess first comment is regarding fundraising. The library formed a foundation about 2 years ago. It's a separate corporation. And what they do is they're doing all the fundraising. So it's a separate corporation from the library. So they talk to everybody, they know what's coming in, they know when it's coming in. So they're really in the details. And what's happened is now that we're getting close with the MOU and John's getting ready to put the whole loan order process together, he's asked us for that, what you just asked for, John. Basically, the expenses of the project laid across a timeline, and then how is the money going to flow in, whether it's the grant from the state or private money. So we're doing that as we speak because John needs it. But just to give you a high-end estimate, as of now, we between the grant and private funds, we're between 15 and 16 million. And again, there's more coming. It's just the foundation has to give us that information. So we're at about 60% maybe, Joel, to where we need to be. And doing a quick look at the cash flow, I would, Neil's gonna give us a new update on the project expenses, but it looks like any 1 year, it's gonna be about 8 million, 9 million a year, that the costs are gonna be about that for about 2 to 3 years. So anything we can provide, plus the state money of about 2 million a year, the difference will be what John goes out and gets it in short-term bonds. So I don't think in any 1 year, is it going to be more than 7, 8 million? I don't think so. But again, we haven't got the final numbers. And as John has mentioned, it's a 5-year commitment and from the state. And that's what we look at for fundraising as well. That's the core time frame for the fundraising. The key to this, though, is the state won't give us the grant unless we show them by January of next year that we have the funds to build this thing, the 28 million. If somebody came to us today and gave us 28 million, we wouldn't need the city, other than they have to run the project, but we wouldn't need the money. However, we don't have that money up front. So the city has to kind of give us a line of credit, or we'll lose the state grant. So it's like a chicken and egg, right? We need the city to come in and help us, or the state won't help us. And so we're in this point right now where, we're pulling this all together from a financial standpoint. So hopefully, it's a long answer, but hopefully it clears up a little bit.
I think in the interest of keeping this meeting on time, unless there's some other really pressing question, I'd like to suggest that the library folks can head out and enjoy the rest of the evening. We are not taking a vote up or down whether to recommend this or not. That is not our role. This was an advisory briefing so that we had a sense of what this obligation was going to amount to, and with John's help put it in the context of the city's capital planning. So unless there's something else someone wants to talk about right now, I would say thank you very much for participating and for sharing information. If we can get that case study that was referenced, that would be helpful to get it to Kelly and anybody else who would like to see how this has worked, whether as a public-private partnership or public nonprofit partnership. That would be useful just for edification. So thank you, Jenny.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night. I apologize for delaying this on my end. I have no idea why I could not log in, and I was on 2 other Zoom meetings today, so that was like some weird quirk. A bunch of stuff got sent out today. You previously got a link to the Doran Whittier assessment of the city's capital infrastructure. It's basically like a library for us to refer to when we're looking at the various projects that are facing the city, and there's a lot of them. This board has been in this sort of odd position in the past where the needs are so great. We really haven't had to advise on anything because we weren't, these projects were already leaving the station before we could actually weigh in. And so there's an opportunity here to help do a couple things. One is to understand what the need is, so that towards that goal, I'd like to arrange a couple of tours, site visits to some of the more pressing capital investment issues that are out there. One of which is the police station courthouse, which is a project that has gotten more expensive as time goes on. One is the city hall data and electrical feed issues. There's a whole bunch of cabling issues, and that's just the sort of tip of the iceberg for city hall, but that's on the list of projects that need to get done. And we need to take a look at some of the other pressing, but who knows where they can fit in projects, such as a whole bunch of things that need to happen in the DPW yard, the fire station, which will be Central Fire, which will be celebrating its 100th anniversary as a building in a couple of years. We are just, like I think most municipalities have a lot of unmet needs. So there'll be a couple of tours we plan to organize. The first one being for the police station courthouse project, and then try to get something going on those next month. So I'm going to ask Shelley to send around a Google poll for any daytime availability that people would have for that. Same with the Public Works Yard and City Hall tour. We have on the first of the agenda to pick a vice chair. We don't have everybody here tonight, so I wouldn't want to go down that path without having everybody on board. So if anyone wants to volunteer, that would solve the problem. Joel, thank you.
Well,
Is
you
that
were
why you
muted.
unmuted?
We already took a vote and everything, so I got the short stick.
Oh,
So we're
good.
all set.
Thank you. Okay. It's nice to be logged out for a while while business is getting conducted. The other thing that we need to take a look at, and that's what some of the things were that were sent out today. There's an ordinance that basically defines our role and sort of establishes a broad framework for the city's capital planning process. David Fields has inherited the sort of administrative job that Jill Cahill used to have. Congratulations, David. You also got the short stick. But as part of this review, the mayor's asked us to take a look at the whole process, both as it's defined in the ordinance and how it's actually practiced on the ground. Given the fact that we can't necessarily weigh in and help the city prioritize what needs to get done because the demand is so high, we can certainly help improve the way decisions are made. And we can also hopefully reframe what the ordinance requires if that's something that seems to be called for. So that will be part of the work plan over the coming year. If people get a chance to read what one of the emails attachments was sent out today, it's short and it's like a head scratcher. So give that a look-see. The second email attachment was from that big Google Docs file, which is basically the introduction and background to the Doran Whittier assessment. It sort of lists all the buildings that are under this committee's purview. It does not include some of the larger capital items like equipment that we will be called upon to occasionally opine on. Most recently, that occurred with the fire department's acquisition of some new fire trucks. And the harbor master was looking to get a new boat. So we really had no opportunity to put that in the big picture, but we were able to at least get briefed on it. Long story short, I think we should become familiar as a committee or as a board with what all of these assets are, and roughly be able to say, these are the criteria we would want to use to understand what needs to be done and how you finance it. So again, that's just something for folks to become familiar with as we sort of go into the rest of the work plan. We talked about a quarterly meeting schedule, I should say. I proposed a quarterly meeting schedule, and I think to get things underway, it's better to meet sooner than later to get those quarters going, because we do have, at the mayor's urging, some tasks that he would like us to get on top of. And that includes understanding what some of these big projects are and what the ordinance looks like. So I would like to suggest that we try to meet starting the second Thursday of each month, starting in November. I asked Joe Cahill, Mayor, and John what would work those dates. That day, the second Thursday, seems to be open. There's no conflicts with city council boards or city council meetings. So if that was amenable, that'd be like November 10th. I think we had the second and fourth Thursdays as best days. And if we started the fourth Thursday, that interferes with Thanksgiving and Christmas right away. So I thought it was just, yeah, Joel?
If we could do, you're right, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we need to do the second. My only concern is the zoning board of appeals meets the second and last Thursday of the month. They start at 7. So there's a potential conflict on my end.
Yep.
If we move after the new year to 4th, there are a lot of months that have 3 Thursdays, and so I'm sorry, 5 Thursdays, and so the 4th Thursday, no planning, no zoning, no nothing.
Okay.
But you're certainly right for the first few months, and obviously not the end of the world that I have to miss, but that'd be my only potential conflict.
Well, that's a conflict, and we don't want to be
Potential.
shorthanded. Yeah, you may not have anything on the agenda. You'd be free to show up,
Right.
or but if we can try for the November 10th session, maybe we can start earlier if that works for folks, maybe around 5 rather than 6. And if we have a focused agenda that doesn't require an extended presentation from anyone, like to be able to say we've hopefully get to maybe a subcommittee working around the ordinance issue. Just a couple of people who want to toss that around and come to some understanding of what it is that the ordinance requires us to do and what the city's capital investment planning process is. And start to at least highlight what the issues would be. So I will put out a request for anyone who might like to just engage in that sort of brainstorming session. And that could be something we could present on November 10th as one item.
Is the third Thursday of the month a possibility?
These were suggested by Jill and the mayor
Okay.
because there's no budget finance, city council meetings, committee meetings or city council meetings on these dates. So I had originally suggested Tuesdays, those interfered with city council. Then there was this committee meetings, and so I think we're
First
all
and
open.
first and third weeks of the month, the city council subcommittees meet. BNF is, gosh, that Monday. I think O&A is Thursday. So O&A is,
When is next
Then-
Monday? I know that.
then planning is also.
ONA's
first and third.
Monday,
O&A is Monday. When's BNF? Thursday?
DNF's Yeah, I should know. I did it for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I know P
Yes,
and D's
you, yes, you
Wednesday.
should know. Yes, BDF is Thursday.
Right,
Thursdays.
and planning board's also first and third Thursdays.
Just so you know, Paul, I am actually traveling on the 10th. I get off an airplane at 4:30, so.
It's so fine. I'll leave you my phone and you can zoom in. Not a problem, John. Do
I'll try.
wherever you are.
I'll try.
No, hardly. Where are you going?
Just Florida.
Okay,
I'll actually be coming back.
okay. Yeah, again, we were down 2 members tonight who had, the people who had conflicts, so I don't want to belabor that discussion of trying to schedule, but if we try for November 10th and give it a shot, and maybe we can come up with something else that works for folks.
Paul, if I can just say,
Yeah.
I'm pretty loose, so whatever works for the committee, I will try and make it work for me.
Well, that may be.
I would prefer like a 5 or 6 o'clock meeting as opposed to a 7 or 8 meeting, but yeah, I can be available.
I don't know if 5 is too early, if that creates a problem with kids picking up and, work commitments or whatever. Is that something that we could entertain, or is 5:30 even?
I know with the council, we went from 7 back to 6 because it just seemed to work out better.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll try to push it back, John, so you don't get out of here when it's too dark. Just a little bit.
Well, again, so I'm able to do this at home. But I'm also able to be available, personally if we want to meet, face to face. So.
So whatever, for some reason, I'm trying to kill this. Why I don't understand any of this now. But it just exploded on me. So, okay. The one thing maybe, John, we can ask you to think about is the overview of city finance and debt service for capital projects. It's
And
something.
Yep, that's fine.
This is so bizarre. Is this work? Okay.
You're good.
I'm just getting feedback myself, so it's not always fun to hear your own voice. Okay, so I will put out an agenda for that meeting. We'll arrange for the tour of the police station, courthouse next month, and do a Google poll on what people's availability might be. And then think about the public works yard and the city hall project. And put together a small brainstorming session around the ordinance to get that discussion going. Is that clear enough? Aside from my own sort of issues here.
I had a couple of more general questions.
Sure.
Hold on, someone's trying to call me. So Alexa, stop. Sorry. So a couple of like general questions. I see, we have the report that's considered an infrastructure report, and it seems to focus on buildings. Okay. So my question, I guess, is it the role of this committee to be considering assets we have, such as land properties? They might not have super high monetary values, but they have future earnings, they have the future use of these properties. So is that within the scope of what this committee makes recommendations for? And the other thing would be about lease properties. Something that's not an asset, but we're making a capital investment on. The rents that the city pays, the repair costs that go into these, such as the preschool. So I guess my question is, besides buildings, are other items that are considered assets, are they within the scope of what we make recommendations to the mayor's office about?
I think that's, can you hear me? Just making sure. Okay. I think those are certainly questions we need to work through with the mayor's office, with Jill and legal counsel, because it's ambiguous. I mean, technically, there's supposed to be a capital master plan that's a 10-year look into the future, and it's supposed to be updated every year. And that should define the scope of what we're looking at, and yet neither of those things are happening for a whole bunch of reasons. And so that begins to be a starting point of, what is the scope and what should this board weigh in on? That makes a lot of sense for the decision makers. I think it's an open question on some of that. I mean, the school stuff, that's got a lot of school committee input and jurisdictional control. So do we weigh in on those things? Do we weigh in on all the equipment issues that, are above a certain threshold expenditure? Do we look at space that the city owns, like parks? I don't think so, but someone could ask the question. Those are capital assets. And David, as he sort of gets comfortable in his job, may have a wholly different perspective on this, including who we might be able to hand this off to. So I think those are the kinds of questions we need to be asking Kelly, and so we can frame the ordinance review.
I think also, sorry for interjecting, for what it's worth, we could look at other communities too to see if they're mostly just vertical and rolling stock, or if they include, parks and schools. For the most part, I've only ever seen rolling and vertical, but can take a look around.
That's good. Good point, David. Thank you. So does that sort of set an agenda going forward where we can get into some more specifics at the next meeting? Are there any particular presentations other than those site visits that people will be interested, and also John Dunn's background on the financing, that you would like to entertain at the next meeting? Give it some thought, email me or Shelley. Because if there's stuff that's out there that people have an interest in, let's get it on the table. And I will just make a final point. The mayor is really interested in this being a vital and constructive, useful board. It's kind of languished. And I think he really values both the kind of input that the expertise that everyone has here can provide, as well as it's a good sounding board for the kinds of issues that are going to publicly surface, and give everybody hopefully a better sense of where we're going. And that may play well into the proposal you might have read about today, where he wants to do a master plan, revisit the master plan that's now 20-something years old. So
and Paul, I would echo that it's unfortunately this group has languished over a couple of years, but it's important for the city to have basically these type of projects presented and having some type of opinion on them.
Mm-hmm. So he was pretty clear that he would like us to sort of do those deep dives. And in spite of the fact that everyone's got other commitments and this may not be the highest priority, if we can focus the agenda and come back to the city, to the chief administrative officer, to the council with some concrete stuff, that would be much appreciated. And it's kind of the expectation. We will also pass around something that was developed, I think around 2012, which was a series of recommendations that the then CIAB forwarded to the administration. I don't think any of those recommendations were acted upon, but I will try to dig that up so you can get a sense of what has been done in the past. Or not acted on in the past. So,
Proposed.
yes, proposed, yes, and not disposed.
So what are the next steps with the library project?
For us? For us, we were here to listen. We're not taking a vote on up or down, whether to recommend, whether to go back to the drawing board. It was more, I think, an interest on the part of the mayor and Joe Cahill to make sure that we are aware that there was this big project out there.
Yeah.
Not unlike maybe how you would have looked at the West East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School, if we had a chance to be really briefed on that, because it's also another big obligation. The city takes on different whole set of issues, but those are the kinds of background things that we would want to be taking into consideration when we look at the other kinds of projects that really fall under our purview. The same could be said of the police station courthouse. And that's another train that's probably left the station. We can get briefed on it, understand some of the issues that have been raised, and understand what some of that financing will do to constrain other kinds of investments. But we won't be doing a whole lot of, have you given thought to this or that? But that is probably the next biggest thing that's on the table. And the stuff after that is going to be something we can probably help with on an advisory capacity. If anybody has any other questions or concerns, I would then, if not, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just one question I have. The waste treatment plant, is that within the purview of this committee? Is that also a train that's left the station? Where are we on that?
I think it's fair to say we don't have anything to do with that. One, because it's funded through an enterprise fund.
Mhm.
And we'll have a whole set of other funding streams besides those revenues. Whether there's going to be infrastructure grants that come out of federal. So I don't think we can spend a whole lot of time thinking about
Okay.
it. I think we could probably get briefed on what it looks like, what the impacts would be, so they were at least knowledgeable. But I don't think it would fall under the list of assets that we would normally take on. John?
Yeah, again, I'm sure we would like to discuss where this project goes, but it is a project that we have to do. It is not our choice to say that, no, we're not gonna do this.
My question was more of, does that constrain us as we look at some of the other projects within our purview potentially?
Yes, it could very well constrain us. Yeah, it's a very, very large project. How it gets funded is not clear at this point. But we will hopefully be able to, get more information as we move forward as to how this could happen.
Thank you.
So, just one other note. I want to thank Joel and Kelly for sitting in on the ARPA listening panels. should be acknowledged for the time that was spent on that, so that we were able to provide the mayor with at least the feedback from the public on where their priorities were for spending some of the 23 million in ARPA funds, of which 9 million will probably be spent on the sewage plant. So, having said that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, thank you. Thank you very much, and sorry for the technical difficulties. We will try to work those out next, or be in person next time. I'm not sure what happened to the meeting room, but it's a little easier to do face to face.
All right, folks.
Good night.
Nice.